There comes a moment in every life when the noise fades and silence takes over, not a peaceful silence, but a heavy one. The kind that forces you to confront yourself. In Japanese philosophy, this space is understood deeply. It is the moment before action, before collapse, before transformation. The samurai believed that a man is revealed not in chaos, but in stillness. When there is nothing left to distract you, no one left to impress, and nowhere left to run, what remains is your true self. Most people never reach this moment. They drown it out with comfort, entertainment, excuses, and constant movement. They mistake busyness for progress and noise for strength. But the samurai were taught the opposite. They were taught that strength begins when you can stand alone with your thoughts and not be broken by them. Because the greatest enemy was never the man standing in front of you, it was the uncontrolled mind within you. A young warrior once asked his master how to defeat fear. The master did not answer with techniques or strategies. Instead, he asked the warrior to sit in silence. Hours passed. The warrior grew restless. His legs ached. His mind raced. Finally, the master spoke, "This is fear. Not the pain, not the discomfort, but the urge to escape the moment. The desire to look away instead of staying present." That lesson stayed with the warrior forever. In modern life, fear wears different clothing, but it behaves the same way. It tells you to delay. To wait until conditions are perfect. To avoid discomfort. To stay where you are because moving forward feels uncertain. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin living a smaller life. Not because you lack ability, but because you lack discipline over your mind. The samurai understood that discipline was not punishment, it was freedom. When your mind is trained, circumstances lose their power over you. You no longer react emotionally to every obstacle. You no longer collapse under pressure. You move deliberately. Calmly. With intention. This state was called mushin, the mind without unnecessary thought. Not an empty mind, but a focused one. A mind that does not hesitate because it is not arguing with itself. This is why the samurai trained relentlessly, even in peace. Not because they loved violence, but because they respected reality. They knew that weakness does not announce itself. It appears quietly, through hesitation, excuses, and avoidance. And once it takes root, it spreads. One undisciplined thought becomes a habit. One habit becomes a lifestyle. And one day, you wake up realizing you are far from the person you were meant to become. But here is the truth most people never hear: it is never too late to return. The samurai believed that every moment was a chance to step back onto the path. Not tomorrow. Not next year. Now. The present moment was sacred because it was the only place where action was possible. Regret lived in the past. Anxiety lived in the future. Power lived only in the now. This is where your journey begins, not with motivation, but with awareness. With the decision to stop running from silence and start using it. To face your thoughts instead of escaping them. To accept responsibility instead of seeking comfort. Because the moment you do, something changes. You stop waiting for life to happen to you, and you begin shaping it yourself. This is not the path of the many. It is the path of the disciplined. And once you step onto it, there is no turning back, only forward. Takeshi's problem was not weakness of the body, but noise of the mind. On the surface, he looked like an ideal student. His posture was correct, his grip disciplined, his movements precise. Other students admired his form, yet none feared him. Inside Takeshi, there was a constant storm. Every time he lifted the wooden sword, his thoughts raced ahead of the moment. He imagined the strike before it happened, imagined the result before the movement was complete. Victory, failure, judgment, embarrassment, all of it crowded his awareness at once. This is the hidden enemy most warriors never see. The enemy is not the opponent in front of you, but the future you keep dragging into the present. In the dojo, silence was strict. No one spoke unless spoken to. Yet Takeshi's mind was louder than a battlefield. When sparring began, his breath shortened. His shoulders tightened. The sword that felt light during practice suddenly felt heavy. Each mistake fed the next. One missed block created fear, fear created hesitation, hesitation created another mistake. This cycle repeated again and again. The more he tried to control it, the worse it became. This is the paradox the samurai understood deeply: the harder you try to force control, the more control you lose. The other students sensed it. They never mocked him openly, but whispers traveled through the wooden halls. He has skill, but no spirit. His mind breaks before his body. These words were not cruel, only honest. In samurai culture, spirit was everything. A warrior without inner stillness was considered already defeated. Takeshi felt this judgment, and instead of grounding him, it added another layer of pressure. Now he was not only fighting his opponent, but also fighting the image of himself in others' eyes. This is how fear multiplies. One fear becomes 10. What Takeshi did not yet understand was that fear does not come from danger. It comes from division. The moment your mind splits, part of you here, part of you imagining outcomes, fear is born. The body remains in the present, but the mind escapes to a future that does not exist. Samurai masters observed this long before modern psychology gave it names. They knew that when awareness leaves the present moment, strength drains from the body. Reaction slows. Perception dulls. Even perfect technique becomes useless. Yamamoto-sensei watched all of this in silence. He did not correct Takeshi's form because the form was not the problem. He did not push him harder because effort was not the solution. Masters know when not to intervene. They wait for the student to reach the edge of their own understanding. Takeshi was approaching that edge. Each failed sparring match cut deeper than a physical wound. His pride cracked. His confidence thinned. Yet within that discomfort, something important was forming: readiness. One evening, after training ended, Takeshi remained kneeling alone in the dojo. The smell of wood, sweat, and incense filled the air. The training floor reflected the fading light of sunset. For the first time, he asked himself a dangerous question, not, "How do I win?" but, "Why am I never here?" This question marked the true beginning of his transformation. Most people spend their entire lives without asking it. Warriors who ask it are standing at the threshold of awakening. Takeshi did not yet have answers. He only had awareness of his own fragmentation. But awareness is always the first step. Before discipline, before mastery, before strength, there must be honesty. That night, sitting alone with his breath and his doubt, Takeshi unknowingly took his first step toward the lesson that would change everything: the realization that presence is not something you add, but something you stop abandoning. The following morning, Takeshi entered the dojo expecting sword practice, but instead found the training floor empty of weapons. Brooms rested against the walls, buckets of water lined the entrance, and the smell of wet wood filled the air. Yamamoto-sensei stood quietly at the center, his posture relaxed but unmovable. "Today," he said, "we clean." The students bowed, hiding their disappointment. To them, cleaning felt like punishment, a distraction from real training. To the master, it was the training. Takeshi began sweeping the same wooden floor he had walked across thousands of times. At first, his movements were automatic. His hands pushed the broom while his mind drifted elsewhere, to the upcoming test, to his fear of failure, to the whispering voices of other students. Each sweep was careless, rushed, incomplete. He wanted the task to end so he could return to what he believed mattered. But then he noticed the master. Yamamoto-sensei swept slowly, deliberately. Each movement had a beginning and an end. When he swept left, there was only the sweep. When he swept right, nothing else existed. Something unsettled Takeshi. The master was not cleaning to finish, he was cleaning to be present. The difference was subtle, yet impossible to ignore. For the first time, Takeshi felt embarrassed not by weakness, but by inattention. He realized that even in the simplest task, his mind was always somewhere else. He was never fully inside his actions. His life, he suddenly saw, was a collection of half-lived moments. After the cleaning was finished, Yamamoto-sensei called him forward. "What did you learn today?" the master asked. Takeshi hesitated, searching for a safe answer. "That the dojo must be kept clean," he said. The master smiled faintly and shook his head. "Wrong." He led Takeshi to a small hall behind the dojo, where a single scroll hung on the wall. 2 characters were written in flowing ink. "Shoshin," the master said. "Beginner's mind." Takeshi had heard the term before, but never understood it. The master spoke softly. "When a beginner holds a sword for the first time, what fills his mind?" Takeshi answered carefully. "Focus. Curiosity." The master nodded. "And what else?" Takeshi paused, then realized the answer. "Nothing else." The master's eyes sharpened. "Exactly. The beginner does not think of winning, losing, reputation, or future. He is completely here. That is his power." The master explained that experience often weakens people instead of strengthening them. The more knowledge they accumulate, the more expectations they carry. Those expectations drag the mind out of the present. Fear enters through that gap. "You sweep while thinking of swords," Yamamoto-sensei said. "You fight while thinking of tests. You are never where your body is. That is why your spirit collapses." Takeshi felt the truth of the word settle heavily in his chest. The master was not criticizing him, he was describing him. For years, Takeshi had trained to become strong, yet had never trained his attention. He had mistaken complexity for mastery. But mastery, he now saw, was simplicity. From today, the master continued, every action is your teacher. When you eat, only eat. When you walk, only walk. When you hold the sword, there is only the sword. No future. No past. Only now. Takeshi bowed deeply. He did not fully understand, but something inside him recognized that this instruction was more dangerous than any physical trial. It demanded the surrender of mental noise. That night, Takeshi sat alone and tried to follow the master's words. Thoughts attacked him instantly. Doubt, impatience, fear, all rising without invitation. Instead of fighting them, he noticed them and returned to his breath. Again and again. It felt unnatural, uncomfortable, and exhausting. Yet beneath the struggle, a faint stillness appeared. For the first time, Takeshi sensed that strength might not be something he needed to add, but something he needed to uncover. The days that followed were unlike any training Takeshi had known. His body still moved through familiar routines, but his attention was now under constant demand. Each simple task became a confrontation with his own restlessness. When he ate, his mind tried to rush ahead. When he walked, it wandered. When he sat in silence, it rebelled the hardest. Presence did not come gently. It exposed everything he had been avoiding. Every unresolved fear, every hidden insecurity surfaced the moment distractions were removed. At first, Takeshi believed he was failing. His thoughts refused to quiet. His breath felt uneven. The more he noticed his mind drifting, the more frustrated he became. But slowly, through repetition, something shifted. He began to see that the goal was not to stop thinking, but to stop obeying every thought. Each time his awareness returned to the present, even for a second, he reclaimed control. These seconds began to connect. Not in a dramatic way, but steadily, like stones forming a path across water. During sparring, the difference was subtle but real. Takeshi was still struck at times, still made mistakes, but the spiral that once followed no longer formed. A hit was just a hit. There was no story attached to it. No self-judgment. No panic. His breathing stayed deeper. His shoulders stayed relaxed. His movements became less forced. The fight felt slower, not because his opponents moved differently, but because his perception had widened. Present stretch time. Yamamoto-sensei observed quietly. He said nothing, offered no praise. Masters rarely interrupt progress with approval. But the other students began to notice. Takeshi no longer rushed. He no longer looked tense before sparring. His eyes were calmer. His stance more grounded. The whispers changed. He feels different. He's harder to read. They could not explain it, but they sensed it. A warrior who is fully present does not broadcast intention. That uncertainty unsettles opponents more than aggression ever could. Outside the dojo, Takeshi's awareness continued to deepen. He noticed sounds he had ignored for years: wind through bamboo, footsteps on gravel, the rhythm of his own breath. He noticed how often people spoke without listening, moved without seeing, lived without awareness. For the first time, he understood why so many were exhausted without reason. They were never fully where they stood. They were always somewhere else. One evening, Yamamoto-sensei finally spoke. "Do you feel the difference?" he asked. Takeshi nodded. "Yes, master. But I don't know how to explain it." The master smiled faintly. "That is because presence is not a concept. It is an experience. The mind wants explanations. The warrior needs clarity." He paused, then added, "This is why most people never become strong. They seek answers instead of awareness." The master explained that technique lives in memory, but presence lives in reality. Memory reacts slowly. Awareness responds instantly. When the mind interferes, it delays action. When the mind is still, the body knows what to do. This was the foundation of all real combat. Not speed. Not force. But undivided attention. Takeshi realized something profound. His fear had never been about losing or being hurt. It had been about not trusting himself. Presence restored that trust. Each moment he stayed here, he proved to himself that he could meet reality without escape. That confidence did not shout. It settled quietly, deep in his posture and breath. By the end of the 4th week, Takeshi no longer felt like he was practicing presence. He felt like he was remembering it. As if this state had always been available, buried beneath layers of noise. The sword had not changed. His body had not changed. But the one holding the sword was no longer divided. And in that unity, real strength began to emerge. The real test arrived without warning, as all meaningful tests do. It was announced quietly after evening training, without ceremony or explanation. At dawn, the students would face a full-contact trial against unfamiliar opponents from a neighboring dojo. No rankings. No titles. No excuses. The purpose was not victory, but exposure. To reveal what remained when comfort was removed. Takeshi felt the familiar tightening in his chest, but this time, he did not resist it. He noticed it, breathed, and stayed present. That night, sleep came in fragments. Sounds felt sharper. Thoughts attempted to return, offering images of failure and pain. But Takeshi no longer chased them. He observed them like passing clouds. This alone was a victory. Fear still existed, but it no longer controlled the direction of his mind. The samurai taught that courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to be ruled by it. For the first time, Takeshi understood this not as a saying, but as a lived truth. At sunrise, the courtyard filled with tension. The visiting warriors carried themselves differently, louder, more aggressive, fueled by visible confidence. Their movements were sharp, their expressions challenging. Takeshi watched without judgment. He noticed his breath, the weight of his feet on the ground, the texture of the sword in his hands. Nothing else mattered. No audience. No outcome. Only the next moment. When the match began, something remarkable happened. Takeshi did not think. His body moved before thought could interfere. Each step flowed naturally into the next. When he was struck, he adjusted without frustration. When he saw an opening, he acted without hesitation. There was no sense of time passing. No internal commentary. Only action and awareness merging into one. The opposing warrior grew impatient. He attacked harder, faster, attempting to break Takeshi's rhythm. But rhythm cannot be broken when it is not forced. Takeshi yielded where needed and advanced where appropriate. His movements were not aggressive, yet they carried certainty. Eventually, the match ended. There was no dramatic finish. No celebration. Only a quiet acknowledgement from the master. What mattered was not the result, but the state Takeshi remained in afterward. His breath was steady. His mind clear. No surge of pride. No collapse of relief. Win or lose, he had stayed present. This was the true victory. Most people win and become arrogant, or lose and become bitter. Takeshi did neither. He remained. Yamamoto-sensei addressed the students once the trials concluded. Today, he said, you saw the difference between effort and alignment. Effort exhausts. Alignment sustains. He looked directly at Takeshi. The body knows how to fight. The mind must learn when to be silent. Takeshi bowed deeply, understanding that the trial had never been about combat. It had been about trust. Trust in awareness. Trust in training. Trust in the present moment. For years, he had searched for strength in intensity. Now he saw it lived in simplicity. As the courtyard emptied and silence returned, Takeshi felt something unfamiliar, calm without emptiness. Stillness without weakness. He understood then that discipline was not restriction, but refinement. It removed what was unnecessary so what remained could function without resistance. That morning marked a quiet turning point. Not the end of fear, but the end of its dominance. Not the beginning of confidence, but the removal of doubt. Takeshi did not feel powerful. He felt grounded. And for a warrior, that is more than enough. In the weeks that followed the trial, Takeshi's training deepened in ways that were difficult to describe from the outside. There were no new techniques introduced, no secret methods revealed. Instead, the focus shifted inward. Yamamoto-sensei began each session with stillness. The students stood without moving, without speaking, sometimes for long minutes that felt like hours. For many, this was harder than any physical drill. The body wanted motion. The mind demanded stimulation. Stillness stripped both of their excuses away. Takeshi felt the challenge immediately. When movement stopped, thoughts surged. Old fears resurfaced, disguised as doubts. Was he truly improving, or had he simply been lucky? Would this calm vanish under greater pressure? These questions appeared uninvited. In the past, they would have consumed him. Now, he met them differently. He did not argue with them. He did not push them away. He noticed them and returned to his breath. Again. And again. Stillness became a mirror, and Takeshi began to see himself clearly. The master explained that most people are afraid of stillness because it exposes the truth. Movement allows escape. Noise allows avoidance. But silence leaves no hiding place. Samurai did not fear this exposure. They sought it. They believed that anything within you that could destabilize you in silence would destroy you in chaos. So they trained where weakness could not hide. During combat practice, Takeshi's awareness sharpened further. He no longer relied on prediction. He responded directly to what was happening. When opponents attempted to intimidate him with speed or aggression, he felt no urge to match them. He stayed grounded, letting their energy pass. The more force they used, the more unbalanced they became. Takeshi understood now that calm is not passive. It is strategic. One afternoon, Yamamoto-sensei stopped a sparring session abruptly. "Why do you fight?" he asked the group. Answers came quickly. "To win. To defend. To prove skill." The master shook his head. "You fight to understand yourself." The room fell silent. He continued, "Every conflict reveals the state of your mind. The opponent is only a mirror." Takeshi felt these words settle deeply. He realized that every past failure had been a lesson he had refused to see. Outside the dojo, life continued to test him. Minor frustrations arose, delays, misunderstandings, criticism. Previously, these would have triggered tension. Now, they became training. Takeshi noticed his reactions before they formed. He responded with clarity instead of impulse. This did not make life easier. It made him stronger. Strength, he was learning, is not control over the world, but control over response. At night, Takeshi often reflected on how little his circumstances had changed compared to how much he had. The same walls. The same sword. The same routines. Yet his inner landscape felt completely different. There was space where there had once been noise. Confidence where there had been hesitation. Not loud confidence, but quiet certainty. Yamamoto-sensei observed this shift and finally spoke what Takeshi was beginning to understand. When the mind is trained, the body follows. When the mind is untrained, no technique will save you. He paused, letting the words sink in. Most people train only what can be seen. Warriors train what cannot. By the end of the 6th month, Takeshi no longer measured progress by victories or praise. He measured it by stability. By how quickly he returned to presence after disturbance. By how little energy he wasted on resistance. This was the discipline the samurai respected most: invisible, internal, unbreakable. Takeshi understood now that mastery was not a destination. It was a way of standing in the world. And as his footing grew more stable, he sensed that the most difficult lessons were still ahead, not in battle, but in life itself. Time passed, and with it came a subtle shift that only deep practice creates. Takeshi no longer identified himself by effort or struggle. The tension that once defined his training had dissolved into something quieter and more stable. He moved through the dojo without urgency, yet nothing about him was careless. His posture carried weight. His gaze was steady. Other students felt it without being able to name it. Presence announces itself without sound. One afternoon, a new student arrived, younger, sharp-eyed, impatient. He moved with speed and ambition, striking hard and speaking louder than necessary. Takeshi recognized himself in the boy instantly. During sparring, the student attacked aggressively, attempting to overwhelm through force. Takeshi did not retreat. He did not counter aggressively. He stayed centered, allowing the boy's energy to collapse under its own intensity. The match ended quickly. The lesson was immediate. Afterward, the student confronted him. "Why didn't you fight back?" he asked, frustrated. Takeshi paused before answering. "I did," he said calmly. "Just not the way you expected." The boy did not understand, but something in Takeshi's tone unsettled him. True strength rarely looks like what people imagine. Yamamoto-sensei later spoke privately to Takeshi. "You are learning restraint," the master said. "But remember, restraint without clarity becomes avoidance." He explained that the final refinement of a warrior is not withdrawal, but precision. Knowing exactly when to act and when not to. Presence allows this judgment. Emotion destroys it. Takeshi reflected on this deeply. He realized that calm alone was not enough. It had to be paired with intention. A still lake reflects clearly, but it can also drown the careless. Strength required responsibility. This understanding matured him further. He no longer sought to disappear within silence. He learned to stand within it. Outside the dojo, Takeshi noticed how people confused aggression with confidence. They spoke quickly, interrupted often, reacted emotionally. He saw now that these were not signs of strength, but of instability. The loudest voices often hid the weakest foundations. The samurai had known this centuries ago. Silence was not emptiness. It was control. Takeshi began mentoring younger students, not through instruction, but through example. He cleaned with care. He listened fully. He spoke rarely, but clearly. When conflict arose, he addressed it directly without escalation. Slowly, others mirrored his behavior. Presence spreads quietly, like calm water finding level ground. One evening, Yamamoto-sensei addressed the entire dojo. A warrior who seeks validation is already compromised, he said. The strongest presence in a room is the one that does not demand attention. Takeshi felt no pride hearing this. Only recognition. Pride had once driven him. Now, it felt unnecessary. That night, Takeshi understood a final truth about discipline. It is not control imposed from outside. It is alignment chosen from within. No one could give it to him. No one could take it away. He had earned it moment by moment, through awareness. The path had changed him, but it had not hardened him. He felt lighter, not heavier. Stronger, not rigid. He stood balanced between stillness and action, silence and response. And in that balance, he sensed the quiet authority the samurai had always pursued, the kind that does not need to prove itself. As Takeshi's presence deepened, the world around him began to respond differently. Situations that once provoked tension now revealed space. Arguments lost their pull. Urgency no longer dictated his reactions. This was not detachment from life, but clarity within it. He had entered a phase where awareness preceded action, and because of that, his choices carried precision. One morning before dawn, Yamamoto-sensei asked Takeshi to walk with him beyond the dojo grounds. They moved through a forest path where mist clung to the trees and every sound felt deliberate. The master stopped near a stream and watched the water move around stones without resistance. "Observe," he said. "The water does not fight the stone, yet over time, it shapes it." Takeshi understood immediately. Strength did not always announce itself through force. Sometimes it worked invisibly. Sensei spoke of the space between actions. Most people act too soon, he said. They fill every silence with reaction. But power lives in the pause. Takeshi reflected on his past, how quickly he once responded to pressure, how often he mistook speed for competence. He saw now that those reactions had been driven by fear of falling behind, fear of appearing weak. The pause had removed that fear. Later that week, Takeshi faced a challenge beyond training. A dispute arose in the village, fueled by pride and misunderstanding. Voices rose. Tension tightened the air. Others looked to Takeshi, expecting him to intervene forcefully. Instead, he listened. He allowed the anger to exhaust itself. When he finally spoke, his words were few, measured, and undeniable. The conflict dissolved not because he dominated it, but because he understood it. That moment revealed something essential: restraint is not passivity. It is awareness with boundaries. Takeshi realized that discipline had given him access to choice. He was no longer driven by impulse or emotion. He could enter chaos without becoming part of it. This ability separated presence from performance. The younger students began asking questions. "How do you stay calm?" they asked. Takeshi did not give techniques or rules. He answered honestly. "I stopped trying to control outcomes," he said. "I focused on controlling my response." That truth unsettled them, because it removed excuses. Calm was no longer a personality trait, it was a practice. At night, Takeshi sat in silence, noticing how the mind still attempted to pull him into worry and anticipation. But now he saw those thoughts clearly, without attachment. They passed like clouds. Discipline had not erased fear, it had made fear transparent. He understood that this stage of growth was fragile. Awareness could easily turn into avoidance if not grounded in responsibility. So he remained alert, not relaxed. Calm, not complacent. The blade still needed sharpening. Takeshi sensed he was approaching a threshold. Not an ending, but a refinement. The kind where strength becomes subtle, and subtlety becomes dangerous in its precision. He did not rush forward. He respected the space. Because now he understood, progress was no longer about doing more, but about seeing more. With this clarity, Takeshi began to understand that presence was not a state to be reached, but a discipline to be maintained. It was not permanent, and it did not protect him automatically. Each day demanded renewal. Each moment required choice. This realization stripped away any remaining illusion of mastery. The deeper he went, the more he saw how easily the mind could slip back into habit. One evening, Yamamoto-sensei summoned Takeshi for a final private lesson. The dojo was empty, lit only by oil lamps that cast long shadows across the wooden floor. The master handed Takeshi a bokken and said nothing. No instructions. No posture. Just silence. After several minutes, sensei stepped forward and attacked without warning. The strike was fast, real, and unforgiving. Takeshi moved, but not perfectly. His response was a fraction late. The bokken struck his shoulder. Pain flashed. The master stepped back. You hesitated, sensei said. Takeshi bowed, shame rising in his chest. I thought I was present. The master nodded. You were. But presence is not passive. You watched the moment instead of entering it. The words landed hard. Takeshi realized the truth instantly. In trying to remain calm, he had separated himself from action. Awareness had become distance. Sensei continued. True presence is intimate. You don't stand outside the moment observing it. You dissolve into it. He stepped closer. The mind loves comfort. It will even turn awareness into a hiding place. That night, Takeshi could not sleep. He replayed the strike again and again. Not with frustration, but with curiosity. He saw how subtle the ego had become. No longer loud, no longer fearful, just quietly protective. It wanted safety, not truth. At dawn, Takeshi returned to the dojo alone. He practiced slowly, not rehearsing techniques, but studying transitions, the instant between stillness and movement. He focused on commitment. No hesitation. No retreat into thought. When he moved completely. Days later, sensei attacked him again without warning. This time, Takeshi responded without delay. Not aggressively. Not defensively. Simply present. The exchange ended before it began. Sensei smiled for the first time in weeks. Now you understand, he said. Presence is not calmness. Presence is engagement without fear. This lesson reshaped everything. Takeshi saw how often people disengaged in the name of peace. How they avoided difficult conversations, postponed decisions, masked fear as patience. True awareness did not retreat. It stepped forward clearly. He carried this understanding into every part of life. When challenged, he did not withdraw. When uncertain, he did not freeze. He acted from clarity, not impulse. The mind still produced doubt, but doubt no longer delayed action. Takeshi understood that this was the final barrier. The point where many failed. They learned stillness but feared movement. They found peace but avoided risk. The master samurai, however, moved freely between both. As the seasons shifted, Yamamoto-sensei spoke less. He no longer corrected Takeshi's form or posture. His teachings had moved beyond instruction. Observation replaced guidance. Silence replaced explanation. Takeshi sensed the end of one path and the beginning of another. He no longer sought approval or advancement. He sought alignment. And in that alignment, he found something deeper than confidence, inevitability. When the time came for the final test, Takeshi did not feel ready. And that was how he knew he was. The final test did not arrive with ceremony or warning. There were no witnesses, no formal announcement, no drawn blades at dawn. One morning, Yamamoto-sensei simply placed Takeshi's sword in front of him and said, "Today, you leave." Nothing more. No explanation. No instruction. The words carried the weight of years. Takeshi bowed deeply, understanding without fully understanding. This was not dismissal. It was release. The master had given him everything that could be taught through form and correction. What remained could only be discovered alone. Takeshi walked away from the dojo with no destination in mind. The path descended through forest and stone, the familiar world slowly receding behind him. With every step, he felt the quiet tension of uncertainty. There was no next rank, no next lesson, no voice to confirm he was doing it right. Only the present step, the next breath, the sound of wind moving through trees. For the first time since he arrived as a boy, Takeshi was no longer becoming something. He was simply being. And that frightened him more than any sparring match ever had. Days turned into weeks. Takeshi traveled through villages, mountains, and roads where no one knew his name or training. He worked when he needed food. He slept where night found him. Each interaction tested his presence in new ways. There was no dojo silence to protect him now. Life was loud, unpredictable, and indifferent. When insulted, he felt anger rise, and watched it pass. When praised, he felt pride, and let it dissolve. Presence was no longer practice. It was survival. If his mind wandered, he suffered. If he remained present, things aligned without effort. One evening, Takeshi encountered a group of armed men blocking the road. Old instincts stirred. The body prepared for violence. But nothing happened. He stood calmly, aware of breath, posture, space. The men looked at him, sensed something they could not name, and stepped aside without a word. No fight. No dominance. Just clarity. In that moment, Takeshi understood the final teaching. Power does not come from force or intention. It comes from coherence. When the mind, body, and awareness are unified, conflict loses its grip. Years later, Takeshi returned to the mountains. The dojo still stood, quiet and unchanged. Yamamoto-sensei was gone. Only the shrine remained, incense burned low, the same scroll hanging on the wall. Shoshin. Beginner's mind. Takeshi knelt where he once had as a frightened student. He did not feel nostalgia. He felt gratitude. The path had completed itself. Students would arrive in time. Some eager. Some fearful. Some technically gifted but mentally divided. Takeshi would teach them as he had been taught, not with speeches, but with presence. With silence. With example. When asked what the secret of mastery was, he never spoke of swords, or enemies, or control. He spoke of attention. Of being fully here. Of choosing the moment in front of you over the 1,000 imagined battles ahead. Because the truth the samurai discovered centuries ago was never about combat. It was about freedom. Freedom from fear. Freedom from distraction. Freedom from the mind's endless need to escape the present. And that freedom was available to anyone willing to stand still long enough to face themselves. The sword was never the weapon. Presence was.